So to summarize what I've covered today, focusing on the Anthos perspective, right? So Anthos deliver the following 4 key pillars. So Anthos is open. It is an open application modernization platform based on the industry-leading open source Kubernetes. So Anthos is hybrid or multi-cloud. It can meet the customer where they are and provides a consistent platform across many different environments. Anthos is fully automated, right? So from the deployment and ease of use perspective, right? So it provides you with fully automated software deployment, upgrade, and management. And we can also help you to do this using, tools like infrastructure as code, uh, with tooling such as Terraform. And then lastly, Anthos is fast, right? In a way that it help our customer to increase their speeds of innovation and to kickstart their adoptions of containers and microservices. So here are the business benefits of Anthos, which I would like to highlight. So first of all, Anthos provide our customer with an application modernization platform that allow them to modernize the application in place or in the cloud, right? So to give them with the options, to take a step-by-step approach, right? So they don't need to like go to the cloud all at once. They can modernize their application in their data center and then choose, how they want to shape their strategy moving forward. It could be a hybrid cloud strategy or it could be a multi-cloud strategy. So we can meet them where they are, right? So regardless of whether they want to do it anywhere. So Anthos help our customer to innovate by helping them to deliver the software faster. And with Anthos integration into Google Cloud, customer can bring the best of Google Analytics and AI solution to the data on the workloads. So this is a use case where a lot of customers are actually, making use of today, right? So as we know, so Google has a very strong portfolio in our AI and machine learning and our ML solution. So by leveraging on this AI ML, you can actually bring some of this analytic capability to your workloads, right, across all these different environments. So you can even bring Google AI ML solutions to an Anthos cluster sitting in the AWS environment. So you get the best of both worlds. So Anthos is also based on the best in class in open source and it leverage on open APIs. So the whole solution stack, if you have seen so far, is all based on open source. And this provides our customer with a lot of, this thing called the workload portability. And it helps to prevent our customer from being locked in to any technology. And Anthos can also conform to all the industry security standards. And it help our customer to also automate many of the software development security, supply chain, for example. So it helps our customer to secure their software delivery with many of the Anthos features. And lastly, it has also been proven that Anthos can help our customer to reduce their overall total cost of ownership by helping them to improve things like resource utilization, reducing the complexity in day-to operation, and also helping them to increase the velocity of their developers, innovation. So all of this helps to generate tremendous business value for our customer. So this is the end of my last slide of what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to switch gear to give everyone a walkthrough of the Google Cloud Console. Right. Okay, so I hope everyone can see my screen. Oh, sorry about it. Let me just close this. Still sharing the. Okay, there you go. All right, so I hope everyone has seen this Google Cloud Platform UI before. So in case anyone has not seen this UI before, so let me just do a bit of introduction. So I wouldn't take too much time, but I'll just repeat 10 minutes just to give everyone, a fresh look. If this is something new to you, this will give you a first look at how this Anthos clusters looks like in the Google Cloud Console. All right, so of course, logging into these clusters, you need to have your Google account. So I already done the login part. So this is where I will see you will see a landing page once you log into the Google Cloud Console. So you basically get to see your own dashboard, right? So this is my Google Cloud project. So in the Google Cloud environment, you will have your organization, and then you have your project folders. So this is how things are organized, for your organization, GCP account. So inside this project, basically this is my project, and then inside this project, I'm going to show you first of all the Kubernetes GKE, right? So this is under the compute. So there's a hamburger button here. When you just click on this thing, and then you can see that there is a Kubernetes engine. So let me just go to here. Okay. So I have two clusters currently created in my environment, right? So I have both are Anthos clusters. So the first cluster is actually on-premises cluster. So this is an on-prem clusters on VMware, sitting not in Google Cloud, but in the data center, right? So I have this running in the data center, sitting on VMware. And then the other cluster below called the GKA cluster. So this is a GKA cluster in the beginning, but once the GKA cluster was created, I basically registered this GKA cluster with my Anthos environment, and then this is now an Anthos cluster. So these two clusters are basically what I have, and then I will show you first of all, a quick look at how we create a cluster. So because in the presentation I covered that, right? So so when it comes to creating a cluster through the Google Cloud UI, it is very simple. So you just need to basically click the create button, and then you will see there's a create cluster. So over here you can see there's two options. So there's a standard cluster, and then there's an autopilot cluster. Okay, I didn't cover autopilot cluster in my presentation. Let me just give you like a 30-second explanation of what is autopilot cluster. So this is a fairly new features of GKE that Google has just rolled out. So autopilot cluster is basically where the customer, if they choose this option, so Google will basically handle all the auto scaling, software upgrade, everything for the customer. And there's also, the customer don't have to do any kind of, operation manually, right, to upgrade their software. So we handle this transparently for the customer. And on top of that, you also handle scaling. So when your workload is deployed on the autopilot cluster, and later on when this workload experiences periods of high utilization, and then it detects that your cluster currently does not have enough capacity, right, to actually handle this additional workload requirement. So it will scale out. So this scaling out is all done transparently for the customer. And then when this workload, maybe like, this could be like e-commerce application running inside the cluster, and then during the Black Friday, the sale, so we have to scale up. But after the sale event is over, then, the cluster will then scale in. So this scaling out and in is all done transparently for the customer. The customer does not need to lift a finger, right? So everything is done. And then this cluster is also very, from the cost perspective, it's also very attractive because it will be billing the cluster based on the CPU used by the pod. It means it's based on actually what is actually running inside. So you don't pay that much when your cluster is actually cold, right? So it's not serving a lot of requests. But then you will pay more when the cluster scale out and your container application workload starts to handle more traffic. So you basically bill you based on the CPU used by your pods. So if your usage is like fluctuating, right? So this is a very attractive option for you. But if you want to have more control, then you can choose a standard cluster, right? So I can choose a standard cluster to show you. So once I select that, then I can get to choose all the options. So you can first give the cluster a name, right? So we just put a one tag cluster, and then you can then select a location. So by selecting a regional here, so this will be a HA cluster. So in the Google Cloud, on Google Cloud, a region is like, like for example, we have Australia region, and then we have like Hong Kong, Japan region. So in the region is like a big geographic area. And inside a region, will be at least 3 data center, right? So this data center is called a zone. So when you select a region, what happens is that it will create a high availability cluster for you in that region. And then your master plane, your master node or your control plane, there will be a replica of this control plane in every zone. So this is like a more costly option because this one costs a bit more because there will be more resources created for the HA. But it gives you better protection against zone failure, right? So if let's say this whole entire data center goes down, which is very rare, then your application won't be affected. So you can select this regional cluster, right? And then you can pick one of the region, the 26 or 27 regions that Google has across the world, or you can select a zonal region, which is more cost effective. So in this case, there'll be HA between the data center only, but if the data center goes down, for some reason, right, which is rare, then your cluster may be affected. Right, so I'm going to select a zonal region just to show you. Right, so I'm going to select Southeast Asia. Right, then you can also specify the node location. Right, so you can also specify that I want this to also be replicated. I want to have additional worker node sitting in the other data center in that region. But from the control plane perspective, there is only one control plane. So there's no HA in the control plane, but you have another worker node that's sitting in the other zone. So what happens is that when the zone that has your control plane sitting inside happens to go down, you will lose communication with the cluster until that whole zone recover. But the workload that runs inside your cluster will continue to function, just that you cannot talk to it for the time being. So that's an option. So there's actually 3 options. So we have a single zone, which has very little HA. There's a multi-zone, some HA, but there's no HA for the control plane. And then the maximum HA will be the regional cluster. So I'm going to just choose the easiest one, right? So a zonal cluster. And then after that, you can then specify the control plane version. So I mentioned this during the session, like you can choose the, the regular channel or the stable channel, which is more recommended for production cluster. But if you want a rapid channel, this is where we always Google will always upgrade your cluster to the latest and greatest Kubernetes release. So you get the latest features, but of course you will be the first one to run to any like bugs or any kind of security vulnerability in that upstream release, because that is the latest one, and it will tend to happen there, right? So you need to select one that is most suitable for you. So I just go with the regular one. So yeah, so that's all you actually need, right? So I can just create a cluster from here. So this cluster creation will take somewhere between like 5 to 8 minutes, right? So this will then come up as a new cluster, right? So Advantech cluster. So once this cluster is up, the next step is that I will then register this cluster to my Anthos environment. So I'll now quickly go to the Anthos environment to show you the Anthos dashboard. So I talked a lot about Anthos dashboard during my presentation, right? So this is my Anthos dashboard. So in my Anthos dashboard, I have 2 clusters, right? So just now I started with 2 clusters because the new cluster that I created is still coming up. So I'll show you the cluster that has really been established. So you can see that right now I have 2 clusters fully registered. And one cluster is on-prem, and then the other cluster is sitting is a GK cluster sitting in the GCP cloud. So this cluster, you can basically expand on this, and then you can see the details, information. I can also see more detail inside here. So for this cluster that I'm going to show you, so this is a VMware cluster sitting outside of Google Cloud, right? So this is like a hybrid environment. So you can see that I can also have full observability, full visibility into the cluster health, right? So this is like not in Google Cloud, it's actually in the data center, but you can actually see things like the GKE version, the total number of nodes, total number of CPU cores, the memories, all this information. It gives you information like how much of this is allocated, right? So total CPU is about 4 CPU per server, per VM in on-prem, and this is the total amount of memory and how much of this is currently being used. So it gives you all this information. It also give you information about the storage as well, right? How this storage, so this storage is actually created by using the VMware, the data store, right? So this is a data store that's actually providing the stateful storage. So I can also deploy application onto my on-prem cluster from the marketplace, right? So I can deploy, let's say, okay, Anthos cluster. So I can deploy from the marketplace. So you can see that these are the list of all the third-party software validated by Google that you can actually deploy from the marketplace onto any of your Anthos cluster environment, right? So this cluster can be sitting in a data center, it can be sitting in GCP, they can also be sitting in other cloud environment. So you can choose all the software, like for example, you can deploy like Redis Cache, you can deploy Jenkins, Elastic Logging, GitLab, anything that you want. So some of this has its own bring a license, right? So you can also like purchase license through the Google Cloud Marketplace. So the benefit of this is that you get one billing, right, all from Google, right? Even if you consume third-party software, so it will help you to make things tidy, from the resource costing perspective. So this is how we can deploy marketplace. So when you deploy, let's say I want to deploy this software. So you can just purchase it, and then this will then be pushed down onto your cluster, to my cluster, sitting on VMware in my on-prem data center. So the rest of the stuff, things like storage, object viewer, migrated containers. So this is options where I mentioned that you can actually use this tool to re-platform your existing application running inside a VM to a containers, right, through this migrate to containers tool. So this is very simple. And then config management. So I mentioned about policy management during my session. So this is about you using the concept of policy as code. So I can create this policy as code that basically describe the desired state of my cluster, right? So the policy, like this cluster should have what namespace, should have what application running. So I basically create all this inside a piece of code in YAML file. I check this YAML file into a Git repository. And then once the cluster are synchronized, then it will enforce this cluster configuration state across all my cluster in my entire environment. So this is like how I manage my cluster at scale. So if I have thousands of clusters, right, I can't be possibly checking the policy to make sure that all the clusters are synchronized, right? So I have to find a way to scale. So this is how I scale as my cluster environment grows. So I can then manage all my environment centrally from one place. So this is what we call Anthos config management. So last one, I'm going to show you the cloud logging, right? Just to complete this part before we go to Q&A. So from the Anthos management perspective, you can see that no matter where your environment runs. So I'm going to show you the dashboard for my on-prem environment. So this is my on-prem environment for the Anthos on VMware cluster. So I show you this node status, right? So these are my VM in my data center. So from the Google Cloud, I have visibility into my node health. So you can see that this actually is all done through telemetry data that is extracted from my Anthos GKE on-prem environment. And all this can then be viewed and managed from one place, from one single pane of glass in the Google Cloud Console. So you can see that all this information about the cluster, right? All this information like CPU usage, memory usage. And then I can also go and see the port usage as well. So these are the actual container ports that's running in my data center. So I have deployed a very simple like Nginx port on this cluster. So I can also show, look at things like the memory usage per container basis and all this information. So these are the raw data. And then you can also create your own custom matrices by combining this raw information. Like I said, for example, I want to get a notification when the CPU utilization for this particular container port exceeds 75%, right, on this particular machine, right? So I can combine all these different conditions and create my custom matrix. Then I can create a threshold so that when this threshold is reached, I can then receive notification alert from Google Cloud. And this can then go down to all your operation team so that they will be able to take action or know about this situation.